welcome everyone. In this video, we're doing a review of the Chromecast released in 2020 with Google TV built into it. Let's start with the hardware before moving into the software. This is the first ever Chromecast to come with a remote, and for good reason. The only thing previous Chromecast units could do was allow the user to cast media from their phone, tablet, or computer to the Chromecast unit itself, and maybe possibly run Google Stadia, depending on which version you have. This time around, this Chromecast is running a full-fledged interface called Google TV, which is based upon Android TV, which I'll demo later on. But let's circle back to the remote. It does feel rather cheap, but don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, as the entire kit is rather cheap, with a price tag of $50 US and $70 Canadian. The remote has key buttons you would require, such as navigation, enter, back, home, Google Assistant voice activation with a built-in microphone in the remote itself, power, a YouTube shortcut, and surprisingly a Netflix shortcut. I'm surprised Google put a Netflix shortcut button and not a shortcut button to say Google Play TV Services or Google Play Movies app. Moving along, there are volume control buttons on the right. Now the remote does use IR and HDMI CEC. That basically means you could potentially control the volume of your home theater devices, including your TV, and even turn your TV on and off along with the Chromecast from this single remote. This Chromecast does come in 3 different colors, one of them white, which is what I have, and 2 other unique, somewhat odd colors. I'm a little disappointed it didn't come in a full black version. It would have been nice to have the remote fully black, which would have blended with your home theater seats and other controllers, but that's just me nitpicking, it's not a big deal. The actual media player dongle is compact like previous Chromecast units, and is rather simple to look at, and it has a very subtle G for the Google logo. One side of the dongle is HDMI, and the other side is for a USB-C fitting for power. Unfortunately, this unit doesn't have an Ethernet port on the power brick like the Chromecast 4K version did come with, but I'll let that slide because the 4K version of the Chromecast unit was rather expensive compared to this unit, so I'll let that pass. One thing I am disappointed about is that this unit comes with Wi-Fi 5 and not Wi-Fi 6. I have another video explaining the differences between them, a link to that is in the video description. Continuing on, this Chromecast does have Bluetooth, which means you can connect a Bluetooth headset for private listening. You can also pair a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse if you wish to. When it comes to storage, it has 4 gigs of internal storage. Out of the box, the user has about 1.9 gigs available for use, which means you can load a ton of apps and maybe even some media content if you want to. Okay, so moving on to the most important thing, which is the interface. So I just want to mention before we get into it any further that this Chromecast does support playback at 4K HDR at 60 frames a second. It also supports Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10+. So for those of you who are home theater enthusiasts, you'll be in for a treat. The interface itself is Android TV at the core, but the new overlay, which is brand new as you can see, is called Google TV. So all the apps that are compatible with Android TV are certainly compatible here with Google TV. The interface is basically designed so that it recommends content to you, that Google will, recommend some basic content to you, and as you watch more and more videos, movies, and TV shows, it'll try to use this algorithm to recommend more content that may be relevant to you. So at the base, you do have of course, Google Assistant search, which does give you some recommendations on what kind of things can you try to say, which is a nice feature because sometimes you might not realize what you can look for. This is all purely voice activated, so if I were to press this, it would show me the same results as if I were to use my voice instead. One thing I want to point out is just like a lot of Android TV devices, this Google Chromecast with Google TV does not support Apple TV app. There seems to be none available at this time. So the home page, if you go down a little bit, has suggestions as to what you might be interested in. It tries to pull information based on your watch history and then recommend new content. If you were to long press a TV show or movie, you get additional features and options such as where to watch it. Do you want to watch a trailer? Add it to a watch list. And I'll show you where the watch list is later on. You can actually select, have you watched it, yes or no? Do you like or dislike this content? This, especially here, liking or disliking on the actual Google TV interface, is where the Google algorithm really gets a fine understanding of what you're truly interested in, and it'll try to recommend new content relevant to that. Click and view details shows you a trailer, where to watch it, and how to watch that particular TV show or movie. So in this example, I do have 3 sources to watch Spider-Man Homecoming. I can do it through these services here. If it was available on Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, or Disney Plus, they would also be populated here if those options were available. What's interesting is that it tries to do its best to find the Rotten Tomatoes critic score of whatever TV show or movie that you're being recommended. I've seen that most of the time it will find that score. Very rarely does it not work. Moving down to apps, a little bit further here, this is where things are very similar to Android TV, where it's just a very static layout, left or right. Pretty simple. If you long press and hold the enter button, you can always move it around. Again, exactly like Android TV if you want to. One of the things I noticed about the interface itself and the speed of the device is that it's pretty fast at responding. So one of the things I noticed that apps like Netflix, despite it being very heavy and graphic intensive, it opens rather quickly. Same with other apps such as YouTube. It's incredibly fast, no waiting around for too long, despite this being a simple dongle. Perhaps the heaviest app is of course Prime Video that I've usually tested on multiple devices or even just, on the Android Shield TV. It's one of the heavier apps to use, but I noticed that it is pretty fast and responsive here. Again, for a dongle, it's pretty impressive as to what Google has accomplished. Overall, the interfaces are incredibly snappy and fast. General responsiveness is incredible. The only time I've noticed an issue or a random bug is when I'm navigating through things very, very quickly, looking for something in particular during my testing, and the view will just reset to the default page exactly like this. Now, this has only happened twice, so it's nothing too concerning, but it seems that Google still has some tweaks to make with the Google TV interface. Moving along, any content that is not available for whatever reason, you'll notice a padlock symbol and a price tag sometimes shown next to whatever content is recommended. In this case, I don't have access to this particular movie, so of course I have to rent or buy it through Google Play TV and Movie app. So the interface is a lot better, a lot friendlier, nicer to look at than Android TV. But one advantage Android TV had was that any content recommended here in a row from, say, the YouTube app, another row here recommended from Netflix and Hulu and so forth, you can actually customize which row would it go to. So for example, I could have row number 2 with recommended YouTube content. I could have row number 3 with recommended Prime content. Google TV doesn't allow you to do that. You can't move, say, adventure shows to the very bottom of the list and shows set in the UK to the very top of the list. It's just kind of a dynamic layout that whatever Google wants to show you, it'll just place it there for you. This isn't a big deal, but I wish that since Google has put so much work into improving upon Android TV with this new Google TV, that they would have allowed more customization of the interface. Depending on how many services you have, if for any reason you're not happy with being recommended content from a random app, let's say Disney Plus, you can go to the very bottom of the home page and choose which recommendations do you want or not. In this case, I don't have Disney Plus, so I simply turn it off. It's as easy as that. Going back to the top, it's pretty much the same thing across when it comes to movies and shows. It's all just simply recommended content. So it's stuff that you may have watched, may not have watched, but it's just what's Google's saying, hey, maybe you want to check this out. So for movies, it'll recommend movies. Shows, it'll recommend shows. The interface is very, very simple, very easy to follow. When it goes over to apps, again, this is the same thing you would see on your other homepage where it's just a list of apps you have installed on this device. You can also search through app categories, which goes through the Google Play Android TV store, because again, it uses apps based on Android TV. It'll also recommend apps that you had installed on other Android TV or other Google TV devices, and some recommended apps that you might be interested in. Now, for all my testing, Android TV, Prime, Netflix, Hulu, all those apps seem to work wonders. They work amazing, snappy, great quality picture. The only time I've noticed an issue is with Plex. Remember how earlier I said I'm disappointed this device has Wi-Fi 5 and not Wi-Fi 6? This is where Wi-Fi 6 would have been applicable and good for users like myself. I do have some very large home videos with amazing quality, but that also comes with a very large bit rate. I noticed that the Chromecast can't keep up with it and it'll tend to lag and cut off the video. Now, for most people watching Netflix, Amazon, Prime Video, Hulu and stuff like that, that will never ever be an issue unless you have really bad Wi-Fi in your house. But for heavy home theater users like myself that rely on Plex with really large bitrate files, that might be an issue to consider, that the Wi-Fi is not that great on this device for certain video files. This is a very cheap device, so this next thing is not a complaint, but just something more of an FYI. This is a very cheap media player. And with that said, I do have a file that's 4K HDR, 30 frames a second, compressed in H.265. Very hard H.265 compression at that. This media player can't keep up with it, at least in the Plex app. It tends to struggle, it stutters a lot. So just something to keep in mind for the very intensive, heavy users that will not be applicable for most people, just rare people like myself. If that's the situation that you're in, I do recommend instead that you get the NVIDIA Shield media player. It's extremely powerful. A link to that video review is in the video description. Now at launch, this Chromecast does not officially support Stadia. Google said it'll be available sometime in 2021. Now because you have storage space available to you, I was able to sideload the app and get it up and running. It's just a little bit buggy though. If you need to know how to sideload apps like Stadia and other apps, I have a video explaining how to get that done. It's a little bit tricky at first. A link to that video is in the video description. So the thing about Stadia is that it does work. The main homepage of the Stadia app is very buggy though. As you can see, it's washed out grayish color. Things are a little bit slow to load. It will eventually load. It does work. You can use Stadia to play games. As you can see, it's really washed out colors. And if I go to the top app, I know it just happens to be Shadow of Tomb Raider. And sometimes it is a challenge to reconnect the controller back. You have to reboot the Chromecast unit, so it's not the most fun experience until it's officially supported. Moving over to library, I noticed that the top section is very limited. It seems to be pulling content from the Google Play TV and Movies app. This is content that I've purchased through Google. Of course, the more you populate your wish list, it'll show up at the bottom row, but this section is pretty bare bones and rather scarce. Moving over to the far right, you can access some of the device settings as well as some privacy account settings, which we won't go into too much detail. If you were to click on this thing over here, it goes to the wallpaper. But the easiest way to access that gallery screensaver mode is just keep hitting back on the Chromecast remote until eventually you end up at the screensaver mode. Now you can have preset gallery pictures populated from Google appear, or you can have your own photos come in from Google Play Photos if you want. And then going over to the settings, this is pretty much similar to what you would see on an Android phone, tablet, or Android TV device. It's just a little bit refreshed. It's slightly different in terms of the way it's organized, but very basic stuff. You can control privacy settings, you can connect devices like keyboards, mice, headsets, as you can see here, and it does show the status of the remote in terms of how good the battery level is. One thing I want to point out is just like a lot of Android TV devices, this Google Chromecast with Google TV does not support Apple TV app. There seems to be none available at this time. And one of the most important things about having Google Assistant on a smart device is of course how it can function around what you want. So pressing the Google Assistant button on the remote, let's give a command. What is the weather today?
Today in Brampton, there will be scattered showers with a forecasted high of 7 and a low of 3.
Turn on the dining room lights.
Got it. Turning on 5 lights.
And because this is a Chromecast device, you can cast things from, say, your cell phone, like I did with the earlier example of casting YouTube to this Chromecast. You can also go a step further. If you open up your Google Chrome web browser on your computer, for example, you can cast the tab that you're on, browsing. You can cast a file or even your desktop. For example, let's cast my desktop. So as you can see, I'm casting my desktop. So what you see now, by default, of course, is my Google Chrome. But if I go a little bit further, you can see I'm casting my Adobe Audition, which I'm using to record this very same audio that you're listening to. So what can I say about this Chromecast? Go buy it. It is a stellar media player dongle device with a very reasonable price tag. Not only that, it finally comes with a full-fledged operating system with the actual interface that the user can interact with and a remote control. And Google did a very good job at it at this price point. It's pretty fast and snappy. It has all the core media player apps you would need except for Apple TV, but that's okay. It's hard to complain at this price point. This is the Chromecast probably most people are waiting for. You can actually interact with. And again, you can still use casting features. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to check out my social links in the video description. Hit the like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.